The sun had barely risen when Adjapong woke up. He looked out the window of his big, beautiful room, seeing the city waking up below. Adjapong was a very rich and important man, owner of many companies. But today, he had a different idea in his head. Adjapong picked up the phone and called his friend, Dr. Song. "Good morning, my friend. I need your help with something very important," he said. Later that day, Adjapong met with Dr. Song and his lawyer, Mr. Yu, in his secret office. The walls were full of expensive paintings and the furniture was sparkling clean. "My friends," Adjapong began, his voice serious. "I want to see if my family really loves me. I'm going to pretend I'm very sick and blind. I need your help to make this seem real." Dr. Song and Mr. Yu were surprised but agreed to help. They spent hours planning every detail. Mr. Yu helped Adjapong keep half of his money in a safe place so that no one could get it. Dr. Song prepared false papers saying that Adjapong was very ill. 3 weeks later, the plan began. Adjapong called his wife, pretending to feel unwell. "Honey, I'm not feeling well. Can you come get me?" he said, his voice weak. Mrs. Adjapong arrived quickly and took her husband home. There, Dr. Song waited. He pretended to take a lot of exams in Adjapong. "I'm sorry," Dr. Song told the family, looking very sad. "Adjapong is very sick. He has problems with his heart, kidneys, and is losing his vision." Adjapong's family was shocked. His wife began to cry, and his children looked scared. Adjapong felt a pang of guilt, but knew he needed to continue with the plan. In the following days, Adjapong's house was full of movement. His wife and children took turns caring for him. They brought him food, read to him, and helped him walk around the house. Adjapong watched everything carefully, even though he pretended not to see. He noticed how his wife held his hand affectionately, how his eldest son, AJ, talked about taking care of business, and how his daughter Amma was always nearby, ready to help. But Adjapong knew the real test was just beginning. He wondered how his family would act when time passed and things became more difficult. At night, when everyone was sleeping, Adjapong would lie awake thinking, would his family continue to care for him with so much love? Or would they show their true colors over time? Adjapong knew the answers would come, but he would have to be patient. As he pretended to sleep, he made a silent promise to himself. No matter what happened, he would use this experience to do what was best for his family and his business. Adjapong's plan was in motion, and only time would tell what he would discover about the people he loved most. The days at Adjapong's house passed slowly like a turtle. At first, everyone ran to help their sick father. But over time, things started to change. Mrs. Adjapong, who used to always stay close to her husband, now spent more time away from home. She said she was taking care of the family business. AJ, the eldest son, also disappeared for long periods. Amma, the youngest daughter, noticed these changes. She saw how her father became more and more alone. She was often the one who brought him food or read him stories to help him sleep. One day, Amma heard a strange conversation coming from the office. She approached the door and heard her mother's voice. "We can't go on like this, AJ. The company is losing money." "Calm down, Mom," AJ replied. "I have a plan. Let's sell some of the smaller factories." Amma was surprised. His father always said that every part of the company was important, like the pieces of a puzzle. Days later, Amma saw her mother leaving the house all dressed up. "Where are you going, Mom?" he asked. "I have an important meeting, dear," Mrs. Adjapong replied, without looking her daughter in the eye. But Amma knew it wasn't true. She had heard her mother on the phone earlier, arranging to meet someone named Kwesi. In the evening, Amma went to see her father. Adjapong was sitting on the bed, staring into space. "Father," Amma said softly, "are you okay?" Adjapong turned his head in the direction of the voice. Even though he couldn't see it, he smiled. "I'm fine, my dear. Just a little tired." Amma held her father's hand. "Dad, something's wrong. Mom and AJ are acting strange." Adjapong was quiet for a moment. Inside, his heart ached. He really wanted to tell Amma the truth, to say that he wasn't really sick. But I knew I needed to continue with the plan. "Don't worry, my daughter," he said finally. "Things will get better." But things didn't get better. The family business began to have serious problems. AJ made bad decisions, selling important parts of the business. Mrs. Adjapong spent a lot of money on expensive clothes and parties. One day, Amma decided that she needed to do something. She went to the office where her mother and AJ were talking. "Mom, AJ," she said, entering the room. "We need to talk about Dad. He's being left out." AJ laughed. "What are you talking about, Amma? Dad is being well taken care of." "No, you're not!" Amma shouted. "You guys barely spend any time with him. And what's happening with the company? Why are you selling everything?" Mrs. Adjapong turned red with anger. "Don't meddle in adult matters, Amma. Go back to your room." But Amma didn't give up. "No! You are destroying everything Father built." AJ stood up, furious. He pushed Amma out of the office. "Stay out of this, you brat!" Amma fell to the floor, crying. She ran to her father's room. Adjapong heard her daughter come in, sobbing. "What happened, my dear?" he asked, worried. Amma told everything to her father. About the fights, about how bad the company was doing, about how he was being forgotten. Adjapong felt his heart sink. He didn't expect things to get so bad. But he knew he needed to be strong, for Amma and the rest of the family. "Amma," he said softly, "sometimes people do wrong things when they are scared or confused. But we can't give up on them. We need to have hope." Amma hugged her father tightly. "I'll take care of you, Dad. I promise." That night, after everyone went to sleep, Adjapong lay awake thinking. He knew his plan had revealed things he didn't want to see. His family was falling apart. But he also saw something beautiful, Amma's love and courage. She was the only one who really cared, who fought for what was right. Adjapong decided it was time to change things. He couldn't let his family continue down this path. But how could he fix everything without revealing his secret? As the sun began to rise, painting the sky pink and orange, Adjapong made a new plan. A plan to save your family and your business. And he knew that Amma would be an important part of that plan. The sun had barely risen when Amma woke up. She got dressed quickly and went to see her father. He found Adjapong sitting on the porch, his face turned toward the garden that he could no longer see. "Good morning, Father," Amma said softly. Adjapong smiled when she heard her daughter's voice. "Good morning, my dear. You're up early today." Amma sat next to her father. "Father, I have an idea. What if we went to the village? There are healers there who might be able to help you." Adjapong was quiet for a moment. Inside, he felt guilty for deceiving his devoted daughter. But I knew I needed to continue with the plan. "I think it's a great idea, Amma," he said finally. Later that day, Amma went to talk to her mother about the trip to the village. She found Mrs. Adjapong in the bedroom, getting ready in front of the mirror. "Mom, I want to take Dad to the village," Amma said. Mrs. Adjapong didn't even look at her daughter. "We don't have time for that, Amma. I have an important meeting today." Amma felt anger rising within her. "Reunion? Or are you going to meet Kwesi again?" Mrs. Adjapong froze. She turned around slowly, her eyes flashing with anger. "What did you say?" "I know about Kwesi, Mom," Amma said, her voice shaking. "I know you've been hanging out with him while Dad's home sick." Mrs. Adjapong grabbed Amma's arm tightly. "Listen here, girl. If you tell this to anyone, especially your father, I will make sure you don't get a dime of the inheritance. Understand?" Amma pulled her arm away, tears in her eyes. She ran out of the room, her heart broken. That night Amma packed her bags in secret. She grabbed some clothes for herself and her father, and some money she had saved. Early the next morning, before the rest of the family woke up, Amma went to Adjapong's room. "Father," she whispered, "let's go to the village now." Adjapong, surprised by the urgency in his daughter's voice, agreed. Amma helped him get dressed and guided him out of the house. They took a taxi to the bus station and boarded the first bus to the village. During the journey, Amma held her father's hand, her heart filled with hope and fear. When they arrived at the village, they were greeted by Adjapong's aunt, a lady with white hair and a kind smile. "My dear nephew," she said, hugging Adjapong. "We were so worried when we heard you were sick." Amma explained the situation to her aunt, who promised to take Adjapong to see the local healer the next day. That night, lying on a simple bed at her aunt's house, Amma finally let the tears fall. She cried for her sick father, for her mother who had betrayed the family, for her brothers who only cared about money. The next day they went to see the healer. He was an old man, with wise eyes and calloused hands. He asked to be alone with Adjapong. When the door closed, the healer looked into Adjapong's eyes. "You're not really sick, are you?" Adjapong, surprised, shook his head. "How do you know?" The healer smiled. "I have eyes that see beyond what people show." "Why are you pretending, my son?" Adjapong, feeling that he could trust the wise old man, told the whole story. About his plan to test the family, about how things had gone wrong, about Amma's love and dedication. The healer listened to everything in silence. When Adjapong finished, he said, "You started this with good intentions, but now you are hurting the person who loves you most. It's time to tell the truth." Adjapong knew the healer was right. He called Amma to enter the room. "My dear daughter," Adjapong began, her voice trembling, "I have something important to tell you." He told everything to Amma. About the plan, about how he wasn't really sick. Amma listened silently, tears streaming down her face. When Adjapong finished, Amma was quiet for a long time. Then, to everyone's surprise, she hugged her father tightly. "Dad, I understand why you did this," she said between sobs. "But please don't lie to me anymore. We are family. We should trust each other." Adjapong hugged her daughter back, her heart full of love and regret. "You're right, my dear. There will be no more lies. Let's fix our family together." That night, Adjapong and Amma talked for hours. They made plans to return home, to confront the rest of the family, to save the company. Before going to sleep, Amma looked at her father. "Dad, even though you're not sick, I'm glad we came to the village. I think we both needed this." Adjapong smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "You're right, my dear. Sometimes we need to step away to see things clearly." The big house looked different now, as if it held sad secrets. Amma held her father's hand, giving him strength. When they entered, they found Mrs. Adjapong and AJ in the room. They looked surprised and a little angry. "Where were you?" shouted Mrs. Adjapong. "We were worried." Adjapong looked at his wife with sad eyes. "We need to talk," he said in a calm voice. "All of us." They sat in the room. Adjapong took a deep breath and began to tell everything. About how he wasn't really sick, about the plan to test the family. As he spoke, he saw the faces of his wife and son change from surprise to anger. "How could you do that?" AJ shouted, standing up. "You tricked us." Mrs. Adjapong remained silent, her face pale. She knew her own actions had been discovered. Adjapong looked at each of them. "Yes, I deceived you. And I regret it. But what I found out made me very sad. You forgot what's really important." He told them about how they had neglected to care for him, about the bad business decisions, about Mrs. Adjapong's betrayal. The room fell silent. AJ looked embarrassed. Mrs. Adjapong started crying. "I know we all make mistakes," Adjapong continued. "But now we have a chance to make things right." He turned to Amma, who was standing quietly beside him. "Amma was the only one who showed true love and care. Therefore, I decided that she will inherit the company and our properties." AJ jumped out of his chair, furious. "That's not fair. I'm the oldest." Adjapong looked at his son firmly. "Being the oldest doesn't mean you're ready to lead, AJ. Amma has shown wisdom and compassion. She's the right choice." Mrs. Adjapong, through tears, looked at her husband. "What about me?" she asked in a shaky voice. Adjapong sighed. You broke my trust, darling. But I still believe we can fix our marriage if you want to try. In the days that followed, the Adjapong family went through many changes. Amma assumed leadership of the company, bringing new ideas and energy. She worked hard to right the wrongs AJ and her mother had made. AJ, after much thought, apologized to his father and sister. He began working at the company under Amma's guidance, learning to be a better leader. Mrs. Adjapong decided to stay and work on the wedding. It wasn't easy, but over time, she and Adjapong began to reconnect. One day, months later, the family was together for dinner. Adjapong looked around the table and felt his heart fill with joy. Amma was telling us about the company's new projects, her eyes shining with excitement. AJ asked questions, showing genuine interest. Mrs. Adjapong was smiling, holding her husband's hand. You know, Adjapong said, making everyone look at him. I started all of this wanting to test you. But in the end, I was the one who learned the most important lesson. What lesson, father? Amma asked. Adjapong smiled. That the love of a family is stronger than any test. That we may make mistakes, but we always have the chance to make things right. And that sometimes we need to lose something to understand its true value. Everyone was quiet for a moment, thinking about Adjapong's words. I'm proud of you all, he continued. Amma, for your strength and compassion. AJ, for your humility in learning. And you, dear, he said, looking at his wife, for your courage in starting over. That night, after everyone went to sleep, Adjapong stood on the balcony looking at the stars. He thought about how his life had changed in the last few months. The plan he thought would show his family's weaknesses ended up revealing their strength. Amma joined him, bringing 2 cups of hot tea. What are you thinking about, Dad? She asked, handing him a cup. Adjapong smiled. I'm thinking about how lucky I am. I have an amazing daughter, a son who's growing up, a wife who's trying hard, and a company that's in good hands. Amma rested her head on her father's shoulder. All this because you had the courage to test us, father. Even if it wasn't in the best way. Adjapong laughed softly. You're right. Sometimes we need to shake things up to see what's really important. They stood there, father and daughter, looking at the stars and thinking about the future. A future that now seemed bright and full of possibilities. Adjapong knew there were still challenges ahead. Fixing a family and a business was not easy. But he also knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. As the sky grew darker and the stars shone brighter, Adjapong made a silent promise. He promised to never again take his family for granted, never again to doubt the power of love and honesty. And there, under the starry sky, with his daughter by his side, Adjapong felt a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that no matter what the future brought, his family would face it together. Stronger, wiser and more united than ever.